Hello, welcome to another episode of Chaotic Torture RC. This evening while I'm recording, I'm going to do a little tutorial on motor setup and break-in. There's been a lot of videos done on it and not much has changed throughout the years, but I figured since I've got some new viewers watching my channel, some may be just getting into the hobby and beginning, so I figured I'd go ahead and do a video on this. I've got a motor stand right here. This is an old one from probably about 17-20 years ago that I used to use for breaking in motors and dialing them in and tuning them and stuff. In fact, the motor in here is one of my very first Energy Crawler motors. This when this was sold, this was just called a lathe motor. They still sell them and list them as lathe motors, but I've had this for a very, very long time, and with routine maintenance on it, the motor is still running strong. The motor I'm going to use for tonight's demonstration is another Energy 35 churn, brand new in the package. Brush motor. It's 35 churn by 1 wind, means it's not super fast, and the 1 wind gives it lots of torque. I won't go too much into details on the motor churns and winds on that, because that'll vary from user to user and what you're using it for. The 35 churn motor that I'm going to be working with is going to be going into a Matzilla build. I've had this built once before, tore it down. Now I'm redoing it. I was purposely going to try to build a mud basher, just all out speed, but now I'm going to tame it down for some trailing and some crawling, light mud and stuff. So I figured new build, why not give it a new motor? I could go with the Tikka, could go with all other sorts of motors out there, but in all honesty, throughout the years, if you're going brushed motor, other than some of the Holmes Hobbies motors, which is a completely different spectrum because those are all hand wound and handmade, I have no problem using Energy. This motor, like I said, I've had this many years. The only thing I've ever done with it is routine maintenance, change the brushes out, and I think occasionally I've gone through 2 sets of springs on this. The motors are relatively cheap. I won't go into price because they'll vary depending on where you order it from or pick them up at. First thing though that you got to do, pull it out of the package, of course. Nice, brand new. I can't call it shiny. The can's a little shiny, but the decals are very flat, paper-esque looking on these. But it is what it is. I'm gonna go for this part of it. I'm going to pop it in my motor stand. This helps me hold my motors in place while I solder wires and leads to them. When this was my break-in stand years ago, after running it, I'm going to do the water break-in method. It's one of the easiest ones you can mess with and do. But I used to have fans that you could pop on this, on the end of your armature here, that would help cool it down during break-in process as you ran water through it instead of dipping it in water. So first things first though, I need to put some motor leads on here. So I'm going to put a little bit of flux on here, don't take much. You don't have to use flux if you're using rosin solder that's got the flux in it. I just like to use the flux as it helps it flow a little better. And then if you're using your standard red and black wires like I'm going to be doing, pay attention to orientation. It's marked on the can which side's positive, which side's negative. That's my positive, so I'm going to go ahead and do that one first. Always be sure, these are already pre-tinned. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little more solder to them. Go ahead and tin my bases here. Doesn't take a lot of solder. You do want to get a good foundation on there. You don't need to glob it on. I've seen people over the years that have solder built up super thick. I'll go ahead and zoom this in real quick a little bit so you can see. Try to get my camera to focus on that. It's not going to want to right now. But anyways, it's real thin. You don't have to glob it on, like I said. And a lot of people just, I've seen several motors where it's just caked on super thick, and it's not needed. Already tinned that wire. Hold it there, let it set. Worst thing you can do is use a dirty soldering iron, then you'll get cold solder joints. I keep a wet towel in my base so I can continuously wipe and clean. Cold solder joints will do nothing but cause you issues later on down the road out in the field. I've ran with a few guys that have experienced what it's like to have cold solder joints with your battery leads and such, and it's kind of a pain in the rear when you run all your wiring, get everything all tucked and tidied in on a truck with a lot of wires, and then to be shut down by a cold solder joint and have to track down and figure out what it is. But anyways, I've got the wire soldered on. Now I'm going to go for the break-in. I'm using the motor method. I'm going to keep a towel handy just so I don't make a complete mess out of my workbench, but I got the Cal RC mat, so it's easy cleanup if I was to make a mess. But anyways, no need to make a mess if I don't have to. And if you're doing this, kids, get permission, use an old towel, whatever. I'm using an old dishcloth that we had. I'm not using the wife's cupcake one. She's looking at me when I said dish rag as I'm speaking now. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and plug these into a ESC. There's several ways you can do this. Some people will just run straight power to the motor with no speed control. I don't like to do that. I like to break my motors in slowly. Because basically all you're doing when you're breaking into motors, your brushes, when you get them, they're just squared on the ends. And your column is circular. So when you're breaking it in, what you're doing is, it's kind of hard for me to explain like this. I should have drew it out on paper. But what you're doing is when you're breaking it in, you're wearing that square into the curve of your armature. That way your brush seats and fits better. And by doing that, you'll gain some performance. It'll have a little more power. You gain a little more torque. But not only that, it will last longer. Your armature will wear even. You won't get the flat spots in your armature. Not saying you have to break your motors in. A lot of people that just don't care will throw a new motor in, go run it, and that's all they do. And if you don't like the motor you're running, or you don't mind buying a new motor as often, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But like I said, I've had this specific motor here for as long as I've been running trail trucks and crawlers, and other than replacing the brushes out every so often, and I've gone through 2 sets of springs on it, the motor's not failed me. The armature and column are in good condition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my radio on, plug in. And also, when you're getting ready to do this, be sure you keep, this motor here specifically has bearings at each end. It's got one in each end of the end bells. I just keep bearing oil handy while I'm doing this. That way when I break it in, after I pull it out of the water and I'm done, I can re-oil the bearings so they don't rust up, they don't seize and such. But for the break-in, all I'm going to do is just drop my motor in that water. You can hear it, and I've got some overflowing, hence why I've got the towel here with me. But you don't have to go full throttle. What a lot of people do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to adjust my throttle up, bring it down a little bit. and just sit and let that run. Traditionally, a lot of people would let their motor run through a battery doing this. With LiPos today, they run much longer. I go anywhere from half hour to an hour while I do my motor break-ins. Sometimes if I'm re-breaking in new brushes on an old motor, I'll change my water out a couple times, because as you do it, sometimes your water can get very dirty and cloudy because the material off your brushes is wearing off. And basically what the water is doing, it's acting as an abrasive. A lot of people think of water as a wet, smooth surface. Yeah, it's wet, but it's really not smooth. It is actually an abrasive surface. And just for video's sake, I'm going to go ahead and pull the power down off the motor. Pull it out. What I would do, just let all the water drip out of it. Some people will spray WD-40 in it. I don't recommend it because the WD-40 will collect and draw dust into it. Yeah, it does dissipate the water, but it also will draw dust and hold dirt in there. So I will use, what I've got here is, it's called Epic, from the company Epic. It's just their bearing oil. You just take and put a drop or two in there. You don't have to use a whole lot, a little bit goes a long way. And then run your motor for a second. As it spins, it'll pull the oil down into the bearing. And then come around here, put some in through here. And what I usually do when I'm putting it in through the top, I don't know that it matters, but out of habit from the years I used to race and stuff, I'll run it in reverse to help pull it down. I don't know that it matters which direction you go, but... And then if you want to get real specific about it, this is going overboard with it. You have a couple screws here where you can take out and pull your end bell off. Some interference and glitching with my radio there. You got a couple screws there, you can pull your end bell off. You can oil and lube everything from the inside. It's not necessary, so it's not something I would necessarily recommend doing, but if you just wanted to do it for the reassurance and the extra sound of mind knowing that, hey, that enough oil got into it. Most of your bearings are sealed anyways in the hobby. This is just, it helps get it back in there and helps lubricate it around the armature and stuff and prevent rusting and seizing in there. And that is basically about it as far as motor break-in and stuff like that. How often to change your brushes and the springs on the motor for routine maintenance, that's going to vary and depend on how you treat your motor, the type of conditions that you run in. I usually change mine out every couple months unless I've been running extremely hard, or if I'm running in a lot of water, then I might have to change them even more often than that. But brushes are cheap, especially for the energy motors. You can buy a bulk of energy brushes. I think last set I got was like $12 for 25 sets. That was cheap. Now, don't quote me on the price. It could be different today. I still have some left from the last time I bought them. Spring prices vary. When you buy springs, you can do some research and study on that because they got different stiffness rates on the springs. Some people prefer a softer spring. Some people prefer a stiffer. The softer ones, of course, isn't going to push the brush on the comb as hard. So it varies. You know, your soft one's not as hard. Your stiff springs are going to push it harder. The harder it pushes, the quicker it's going to wear down, of course, but it's also going to give you a little bit increase in your power, slightly more torque. The softer, you're going to lack a little power. In my crawlers, I run the stiffest springs I can find. Now, if I was running on a dirt track and just racing, of course I wouldn't be using a 35-turn motor. And if I was still running a brush motor with today's standards of brushless options, I'd run a medium to a softer spring for that. that's personal preference and choice for you all to decide. And I could have thrown a brushless motor in this truck. I had one in it at one time, but at this point now, I just want to build a truck that I can trail crawl with, beat around with, and keep it as cheap maintenance-wise motor. I don't have to worry about waterproofing the motor as where with your brushless setups. You gotta, if you're running censored, you gotta waterproof your sensor board and such. The setup I'm gonna be throwing in here, everything's gonna be completely waterproof. So if I want to drive like a submarine into the creeks that I run in, I can. If I want to go drive through mud and get mud in it, mud's not the greatest thing. If you get mud inside your motors, it can cause it to cut out and act as it's dying. If it does that, pull it out right away, rinse your motor out, you're good to go. If you keep trying to force it to go when you've got mud caked in there and it doesn't want to go, then you do take a chance of melting your brushes to your armature, and when you do that, you can kill your motor. If you don't have a motor lathe to cut your common stuff, then you just killed your motor. There's no sense in wasting the motor if you don't have to. So just a little common sense, if you run it through a big mud puddle or a deep mud hole and it seizes up and bogs down and you don't get any power to your drivetrain, pull your truck out with your hand and rinse it off. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will answer any question that's asked to me. Thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe. Continue watching as I'm going to be doing some more on a series of the build of this truck. But I'm also working on lights and a setup on my SCX 10.2 where I've got some One Too Many RC lights that I'm going to be wiring in, where some are going to be controlled with the remote here and some's going to be controlled with the RF wireless remote that I've got from One Too Many RCs. Thank you.